Has Ferrari really made the definitive leap in Miami? Or could what Lewis Hamilton just revealed after practice completely change everything we believed about the SF26? Because while the times placed Charles Leclerc at the top and fueled the illusion within the team, Hamilton got out of the car and left a statement that not only surprised the paddock, but also left Frédéric Vasseur and Leclerc himself completely confused, opening a huge doubt about whether Ferrari really understands the performance it is showing on the track or if it is walking on an extremely fragile illusion. The Miami Grand Prix was not just another race for Ferrari, it was the turning point that the team itself had marked for months as the real start of its season. The moment where all the promises, all the simulations and all the accumulated development had to be translated into pure performance on the track, especially after a start where Mercedes had taken absolute control of the championship, leaving the Italian team in an uncomfortable position, forced not only to react but to do so immediately if it did not want to be left out of the fight prematurely. And in that context, Ferrari arrived in Miami with the most aggressive package of updates that they have introduced in this new regulatory era, a total bet that sought to change the hierarchy from the first session on the track, something that was quickly reflected in the times, because seeing Charles Leclerc leading the free practice was not simply a good result, it was a direct declaration of intentions, a sign that the SF26, at least in ideal conditions, had the ability to face the best. While Lewis Hamilton remained within the competitive group, confirming that the car, in terms of pure potential, was responding. But this is where the conflict of this act really begins, because what seemed like a perfect scenario begins to be filled with nuances at the moment in which the real context of that session is analyzed, since we are not talking about conventional practices, but about a sprint weekend where there are only 90 minutes to understand the car, where the track evolves quickly and where times can be completely conditioned by details such as the fuel load or the punctual use of soft tires, which means that Ferrari's leadership, although shocking, was not an absolute guarantee of real competitiveness in the race. And it is precisely at that point where the figure of Hamilton comes in as the element that breaks the optimistic narrative, because while from the outside everything seemed to indicate that Ferrari had taken the step forward it needed, internally much deeper doubts were beginning to arise, doubts that have nothing to do with the speed of the car, but with something much more critical in modern Formula One, the ability to fully understand it, to know exactly why it is fast and under what conditions it stops being fast, something that, according to the Britain's own feelings, is still far from being resolved. This turns Miami into something more than a simple technical evolution. It transforms it into a scenario of silent tension within the team, where two realities begin to collide. On the one hand, the data that shows a competitive Ferrari, capable of leading sessions, and on the other hand, the sensations of a driver who, despite his experience, continues to face an unpredictable car, difficult to read and even more complicated to exploit to the limit, a combination that has historically been a warning sign for any team that aspires to fight for the championship. And while all this is happening, Vasseur maintains his firm speech, supporting the idea that this is the starting point of a new stage for Ferrari, but what he did not expect was that within his own team, the most authoritative voice on the track began to draw a much more complex scenario, one where performance exists, yes, but is wrapped in a layer of uncertainty that can change everything in a matter of hours, especially when the moment of truth arrives in qualifying in the race. Hamilton does not speak like a driver who needs to adapt, he speaks like someone who is completely rediscovering his way of driving, and that is what leaves both Vasseur and Leclerc without an immediate answer, because the Briton reveals that the behavior of the hybrid system, especially in energy management, remains unpredictable at key moments of the lap, something that in current Formula One is not a minor detail. It is directly one of the factors that defines whether you can fight for a pole, or be left out of the fight without understanding why. Here comes the concept that changes everything, super clipping, a phenomenon that Hamilton describes practically as an invisible enemy inside the car, because it alters the power delivery on a straight line, modifies the braking points and forces the driver to anticipate behaviors that are not always repeated in the same way, which completely breaks confidence. And when a driver of his caliber admits that he has to reprogram his instinct, we are talking about a level of complexity that Ferrari clearly has not solved. And this is the exact moment where Act 2 reaches its most critical point, because it is no longer about whether Ferrari is fast or not, but whether it can sustain that performance when it really matters, because one thing is to set a time on an isolated lap in practice, and another completely different is to repeat it under pressure, with degradation, with traffic and with strategic decisions in real time, and that is where Hamilton drops the most dangerous doubt of all. They still do not fully understand the car. This generates a silent internal fracture, because while the technical team sees positive data, the driver is describing sensations that do not fit with that narrative, and that disconnection is exactly what has historically held Ferrari back in key moments, since without a clear correlation between what the numbers say and what the driver feels, any improvement can become a double-edged sword. Leclerc, for his part, is left in a complex position, because his performance on the track supports the team's optimism, but Hamilton's words sow a doubt that cannot be ignored, especially when both drivers are experiencing the car in different ways, which opens another even more delicate front. The possibility that Ferrari has two different interpretations of its own car, something that greatly complicates development and decision-making. Meanwhile, Vasseur faces an uncomfortable situation, because his message of absolute confidence begins to lose strength in the face of a much more uncertain reality, and although publicly the discourse is maintained, internally the team knows that what Hamilton has expressed is not a simple opinion, it is a clear sign that they are still far from having a completely optimized package, especially in an era where energy management is everything. This is where the situation becomes critical, because Ferrari enters the decisive phase of the weekend with a very dangerous internal contradiction. They have a car that has proven to be fast on one lap, but a driver who is saying that he cannot completely predict its behavior, and that combination in Formula One usually translates into inconsistency, strategic errors and missed opportunities, just the problems that have historically dogged the Scuderia at key moments. And when you project this towards qualifying, the risk is evident, because the SF26 may be capable of setting a competitive time, yes, but if the power delivery is not completely predictable, if the super clipping appears at the wrong moment, or if the driver cannot fully trust the car's response, then that potential becomes a coin toss, where each lap can be brilliant, or completely wasted without a clear explanation, something that in such a tight grid can mean losing several positions in a matter of seconds. But the real problem appears when thinking about the race, because there it is no longer about a lap, it is about consistency, management, repeating a performance for dozens of laps. And it is exactly in that scenario where what Hamilton has described becomes more dangerous, because a car that is difficult to interpret not only affects the driver, it affects the entire structure, from strategy to decision-making in real time, generating a domino effect that can ruin an entire weekend even. Having the pace to fight for victory. And it is at this point where Ferrari faces its biggest dilemma, because now it is no longer enough for the updates to work, they need to understand them, they need to correlate what they see in the data with what their drivers feel, and above all, they need to align Hamilton and Leclerc under the same reading of the car, because if each one experiences different behaviors, development becomes fragmented and progress slows down, just at the moment when the championship waits for no one. Meanwhile, Vasseur's figure remains at the center of everything, because his commitment to Miami as a turning point remains, but now with much greater pressure, since Hamilton's words have publicly exposed that Ferrari still does not have full control of its own package, and that forces the team to react quickly, not only on the track, but also in the way in which they interpret and evolve the car in the next races. The conclusion of everything that happened in Miami is not the one that Ferrari hoped to build. It is much more complex, much more uncomfortable, and above all, much more dangerous than the track time seemed, because what Lewis Hamilton has revealed does not destroy the performance of the SF26, but it does question something even more important: the team's ability to understand and control it at the moment when everything is really decided. Ferrari has shown that it can be fast, that it has a car capable of leading sessions and putting itself in direct fight with the best, but Hamilton has made it clear that this speed is not built on a solid foundation yet, but on a fragile balance, conditioned by factors that not even the driver himself can predict with complete certainty, and that in today's Formula One is a very fine line between success and failure. What leaves Vasseur and Leclerc stunned is not only the content of their words, but what they imply in the medium term, because while the team thought that Miami marked the beginning of their comeback, Hamilton has stated that they are still in a much earlier phase than it seems, a phase where the car can perform, yes, but where there is not yet that total connection between driver and machine that defines champion teams. And this is where it all makes even more sense, because Ferrari's recent history has already passed through this point before: cars that are fast but difficult to understand, competitive packages that fail to sustain their performance when it matters most. And it is precisely that ghost that reappears, only now amplified by the extreme complexity of the 2026 regulations, where energy management is not a technical detail, it is the heart of performance. Thus, Miami does not confirm the resurgence of Ferrari. It puts it to the test, because now it is no longer about introducing improvements, but rather about completely deciphering what they have in hand, converting that speed into consistency, and aligning the entire team under the same understanding of the car, something that, after what Hamilton has revealed, it is clear that they have not yet achieved. The big question this weekend leaves is not whether Ferrari can win. It's whether it can understand why it could, And that difference is exactly what separates a casual contender from a true championship contender. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.